My wife canceled our dinner, then screamed, "You do not get to control my life." And that night, standing alone in my dress shirt at the bar of Peachtree Grill, I realized I had no idea who I had actually married. Before we move on, tell me in the comments which state you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode may touch a story that is still unfolding. I booked the reservation on a Wednesday afternoon in October, sitting at my desk inside a quiet office in Midtown Atlanta, staring at a confirmation email like it was going to save my life. Peachtree Grill, Thursday evening. Table by the window because Zara always said she liked watching Peachtree Street when she ate. Said the people moving past made her feel less like the world had stopped. We had not had a real dinner in 4 months. Not a real one. No work phones face down on the table. No laptops open on the kitchen counter. Just 2 people in the same room, paying attention to each other the way we used to before whatever quiet, invisible thing had moved into our marriage and started rearranging the furniture without asking. I texted her, "Thursday night, Peachtree Grill, dress nice, I miss you." My thumb sat over send for 3 seconds longer than it should have. I noticed that. I sent it anyway. She replied within minutes, "I cannot wait," heart emoji. 2 words and a small red symbol, and I held on to it like it was a medical result coming back clean. What I did not tell her was that the dinner was not entirely innocent. 3 weeks earlier, I had been sitting at the kitchen table with our shared tablet writing a grocery list when I accidentally opened the location history. Zara's movement pattern was right there. Clean, consistent, every single Thursday, same address in Southwest Atlanta, arrival around 6:45 in the evening. Departure around 9:15 at night, every week, like clockwork. I searched the address, found a building, found nothing obvious, no public listings, no business name that came up clean. I did not ask her about it that night. I sat at that kitchen table, grocery list forgotten, and I made the decision that I would watch what she did instead of asking what she was doing. That is the honest truth, and I am not proud of it. Because here is what I understood even then, in that kitchen, in that silence. I was not afraid that Zara was being dishonest. I was afraid of something quieter than that. I was afraid that there was a version of my wife that existed in full somewhere I had never been allowed to see. That the woman who made chamomile tea on Sunday mornings and laughed at old Atlanta Braves games with me and cried at every single nature documentary we ever watched together, that woman was real, but she was not complete. And whatever was filling the space I could not reach had been filling it for a long time. I sent the text. I waited for Thursday like a man waiting on a verdict. The tablet was a small, ordinary thing. Black case, cracked corner, one of those household objects that belongs to both people and therefore belongs to neither. I had not gone looking. That matters to me. Not because it changes what happened next, but because I need you to understand the difference between a man who hunts for reasons to distrust his wife and a man who stumbles into something he cannot unsee. The location history was open on the screen before I even registered what I was reading. And there it was. Every Thursday, same coordinates, Southwest Atlanta near the Cascade area, arrival 6:45 in the evening, departure 9:15 at night, not once, not twice. 17 Thursdays in a row going back 4 months, which was exactly how long the distance inside our marriage had been sitting between us without either of us naming it. I Googled the address 3 times. The first search gave me nothing. The second gave me a city block reference and a community services listing that had not been updated in 2 years. The third gave me the name of a building, Southwest Atlanta Community Outreach Center, beige walls, frosted windows, a parking lot that held maybe 30 cars. No website, no social media presence, nothing that explained why my wife drove there every Thursday evening and stayed for 2.5 hours and never once mentioned it at dinner. I closed the tablet. I sat in the kitchen with the grocery list still open in a separate tab, and I did not move for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the microwave clock change 3 times without registering the numbers. Then I made my decision. I did not confront her. I did not ask her directly. Instead, I opened a new browser window and I booked a reservation at Peachtree Grill for a Thursday evening specifically. The nicest table available, window seat, the kind of dinner that requires a response. The kind of invitation that makes it very difficult to say you have somewhere else to be without explaining where that somewhere is. I told myself it was romantic. I told myself I was planning something good for us. I was not entirely lying, but I was not entirely telling the truth either. The dinner reservation was a test. A quiet, carefully designed test dressed in the clothing of a loving husband who missed his wife. And the fact that I felt no guilt about that at the time, the fact that it felt completely reasonable, tells you more about the state of our marriage than anything else I could say. Zara texted back within 4 minutes. I cannot wait. I read it twice and told myself it meant everything was fine. The text came while I was standing at the bathroom mirror, straightening my tie. Not a call, a text, which is its own kind of information. Marcus, I am so sorry. Something came up that I cannot move. Can we do Saturday instead? I will explain later. Love you. I read it once, read it again, looked at myself in the mirror. The tie suddenly felt like it was made of something heavier than fabric. I typed back 2 words, what came up. Her reply took 11 minutes. I will explain when I get home. I did not respond. I took the tie off, hung it on the back of the bathroom door, and drove to Peachtree Grill alone in my dress shirt with no jacket, and sat down at the bar because the table by the window felt too cruel to sit at by myself. I ordered 1 glass of wine, did not finish it. The bartender stopped making eye contact with me after the first 20 minutes, and I was genuinely grateful for that. I thought about my father. I always think about my father at the worst moments. Reverend Damon Carter, who shook hands at Sunday service and kissed my mother on the cheek every morning before work, who had a second family living 40 minutes outside Atlanta for 6 years while my mother worked 2 jobs and believed every single word he said. I was 13 when I found her at the kitchen table with a folder of printed emails and a face I had never seen on her before and have never been able to forget. She forgave him, quietly, completely. She forgave him and then slowly became smaller, like something turning itself down by degrees until there was almost nothing left of the woman she had been before she knew. I swore I would never be the man who did that. But sitting at that bar alone in Peachtree Grill on a Thursday evening in Atlanta, I was beginning to understand that I had also swore somewhere deep and unspoken that I would never be the person it was done to. Those 2 promises were about to meet each other. I did not go home after the restaurant. I drove. I told myself I had no destination. I was lying to myself. I ended up parked across the street from a beige building with frosted windows in southwest Atlanta, fluorescent light pressing through the glass into the dark street. Zara's silver Accord sitting in the 3rd row of the parking lot exactly where I expected it to be. I cut the engine. I sat there for 20 minutes. Nobody came in, nobody went out. I drove home, both hands on the wheel. When Zara came through the front door at 9:30 that night, I was on the couch with a book open to page 47. How was your evening? I asked. My own voice sounded rehearsed to me. Good, she said, tired, going to bed. She did not look at me. I did not look up. The book stayed on page 47. I called Nia Brathwaite on a Friday morning. Nia, Zara's best friend since Clark, Atlanta. The woman who cried louder than both our mothers during our wedding vows. The woman who had known my wife for 11 years and had been there for things inside Zara's life that I was only beginning to understand existed. I called her warm, friendly, said I was planning a birthday surprise and needed some help knowing what Zara was currently interested in. Nia said pottery. She laughed, said Zara had been watching YouTube tutorials for months. I laughed with her, and then I let a small pause settle before I said it. Easy now, she is turning a corner. Hey, is everything okay with her lately? She seems a little distant. There was a pause on Nia's end. 1.4 seconds. I counted it in my head because I had been waiting for it. She is fine, Nia said. The word fine came out 1 beat too late and landed 1 note too high. I kept my voice level. She is not sick or anything. No, she is Zara, you know how she gets sometimes. We ended the call pleasantly. I thanked her. She told me to let her know if I needed anything for the birthday. I sat in my car outside a coffee shop on Ponce de Leon Avenue in Atlanta, and I held the phone in both hands, and I looked at nothing. You know how she gets sometimes. I had been married to this woman for 4 years. I had slept beside her, eaten breakfast beside her, watched her cry at nature documentaries, learned the exact amount of honey she took in her tea without ever once measuring it. I had memorized her. And Nia Brathwaite, who had known Zara since they were 19 years old, was speaking about my wife in a language I did not have the vocabulary for. There was a version of Zara that Nia knew completely. A version that had a history, a grammar, a set of interior rooms that Nia had been inside and I had not. And the pause before Fine told me that whatever was in those rooms, it was not small, it was not simple, and it was directly connected to every Thursday evening, every careful distance. Every night Zara came home and said good, tired, going to bed, and walked past me like I was furniture she had learned to navigate around. I drove back to the office, opened my laptop. I went back to the Southwest Atlanta Community Outreach Center address. This time I dug deeper. City grants database, public program listings, downloadable PDFs from the Atlanta Department of Community Services. I scrolled past yoga classes, ESL programs, after-school tutoring. And then I stopped. I read it 4 times. Reclaim Circle Support Group for Survivors of Psychological and Emotional Abuse in Intimate Relationships. Thursdays, 6:30 to 9 in the evening. Facilitator, Dr. Keisha Watkins, licensed clinical psychologist. 4 times. And then I sat completely still in my office chair in my Midtown Atlanta office building, surrounded by the ordinary sounds of a working Friday, phones and keyboards and someone laughing in the hallway, and I felt my face go quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the room I was sitting in. I was not jealous. That is the first thing I need you to understand. What moved through me in that moment was not the hot, sharp thing that jealousy is. It was something slower and heavier and more devastating than that. It was grief. Because the word survivors was sitting on that screen like a quiet, precise accusation, and it was not pointed at me. It was pointed at someone who had come before me, someone who had built inside of my wife the architecture of a fear so deep and so load-bearing that she had been driving to a building in Southwest Atlanta every single Thursday for 2 years and sitting in a room full of strangers to dismantle it, brick by brick, week by week, alone, while coming home to me and saying good, tired, going to bed. And the question that formed in my mind right then, the one I could not push away, was not who hurt her. It was something worse than that. Does she think that person is me? I closed the laptop, sat in the silence, opened it again, closed it. I walked to the window and stood looking out at the Atlanta skyline, and I made myself breathe slowly, and I thought about every moment in our 4 years of marriage where I had been distracted, cold, late, absent, present in body, but somewhere else entirely in every way that counted. I thought about every time Zara had tried to reach me, and I had given her half of my attention, because the other half was somewhere that felt more urgent at the time. I thought about what a woman who had already learned that love comes with conditions would do with a man who kept accidentally confirming it. I did not like what I came up with. I drove home that evening. I made tea. Chamomile with honey, 2 mugs, the exact amount she always used, because I had watched her make it so many times that her ritual had become mine without my ever choosing it. I sat down at the kitchen table in the light, and I waited. She walked in at 9:20 in the evening and stopped in the doorway. I watched it happen, the shift in her face when she saw the kitchen light on, the 2 mugs on the table, me sitting there quietly with both hands around my cup. She had been prepared for darkness, for the closed bedroom door, for the particular silence of a man who is hurt and has decided that his hurt should fill every room of a house. That was the punishment she had been walking toward all evening, and she had steeled herself for it on the drive home. I could see that in her posture, in the careful way she carried her coat and her bag. What she found instead was light and warmth, and me sitting very still. And somehow that was more frightening than anger would have been. "Sit down," I said. "I am not angry. I just need to understand something." She sat, she wrapped both hands around the second mug. The warmth of it, the familiarity of it, the honey in it, the fact that I had known without asking, something moved across her expression that she quickly brought back under control. "Zara, where do you go on Thursdays?" The refrigerator hummed. A car moved past on the street outside. Atlanta at night, ordinary and indifferent. She looked at me across the table, and I watched a decision being made behind her eyes. "That is my business, John." My jaw tightened. "You are my husband," she said, very quietly, looking directly at me. "That is not the same thing." I opened my mouth. She stood, she carried her mug to the sink, rinsed it with her back to me, set it on the drying rack, picked up her bag from the chair and walked to the bedroom. The door did not slam. That was somehow worse than if it had. I sat alone at the table with both hands around a cup of tea that had gone cold, and I turned her 4 words over in my mind like a problem I could not solve, because I did not yet fully understand the equation. That is not the same thing. She was drawing a line inside our marriage that I had not known existed, and the fact that she needed to draw it, the fact that those words were ready in her mouth, practiced, close to the surface, told me something I was not entirely ready to hear. She had needed those words before, not with me, but she had needed them, and she had learned them the hard way. I sat at that kitchen table in Southwest Atlanta for a very long time. The tea went completely cold. I did not move. 6 days of politeness, that is what came next. The particular politeness of 2 people who are each waiting for the other to speak first. We passed in hallways with small, careful smiles. We asked about each other's days and listened to the answers with our faces arranged correctly. We ate dinner together twice and talked about nothing that mattered. It was the most exhausting week of my entire marriage. Then the next Thursday arrived. I came home early. I could hear the hair dryer running behind the closed bathroom door. I sat at the kitchen table and I waited, but differently than before. Not with tea this time. No warmth arranged on the table. Just me, sitting in the ordinary kitchen light, with a decision already made inside me that I was no longer afraid of. When Zara came out, coat on, bag over her shoulder, keys in hand, she found me there. And she saw my face. Not anger, resolution. The face of a man who has made up his mind and is no longer afraid of where the road leads. "I know about the community center," I said. "I know the address. I know the program." I drove past it. The hair dryer was still running in the bathroom. Neither of us moved to shut it off. "I know about Dr. Keisha Watkins," I continued. "I know it is a Thursday group. I know you have been going for 2 years. Zara set her keys on the counter. The sound they made landing was very loud in the quiet kitchen. "You checked my location," she said. Her voice was flat and precise, like a line drawn in permanent ink. "It was a shared tablet. I did not mean to. You called Nia." Not a question, an indictment delivered without volume. I stood up. "Zara, I am not trying to." And that was the moment, right there, me rising from the chair, her keys on the counter, the hair dryer still running in the background like the world had not stopped. That was when everything she had been holding for 8 months, for 3 years, for her entire adult life, broke completely open. "You have no right." Her voice filled the house. It filled every room at the same time. For a moment the walls felt closer, like the kitchen had shrunk around us. "No right to dig into my life. Not you, not anyone. I am not your property. I am not his property. I will not be monitored inside my own home." She was shaking. Both hands gripped the counter behind her. Tears came without her permission, and I could see the fury on her face at their arrival, the way she hated them for showing up, for betraying her in this exact moment when she needed to be impenetrable. I stood with my hands at my sides. I did not move. I did not speak. I let it land. And then I heard it. "His." She had said his. Not yours, not Marcus. His, as in someone else, someone who had done this before me. Someone who had built the original blueprint of the fear she was standing inside of right now in our kitchen in Atlanta on a Thursday night with the hair dryer still running somewhere behind us. When the silence came, I spoke into it carefully, the way you speak near something that might shatter. "Who is his?" The room went absolutely still. Zara looked at me, and her face did something I had only seen once before, on our wedding night when the photographer finally left and it was just us in the room. Something that wanted to open, something deciding if it was safe. Then it closed. She walked to the bedroom. The door shut behind her, not a slam, worse than a slam. A decision. I did not follow her. I made up the couch, turned off the lights, and lay in the dark with the word his moving through my mind like water finding every crack in every surface. I made myself a promise in that darkness. I would find out. I would not be my mother. I would not forgive quietly and fold myself smaller until there was nothing left. Whatever was being kept inside this marriage, I was going to stand in front of it with my eyes fully open. At some point past 2 in the morning, I heard the bedroom drawer open, paper rustling, then silence with a texture to it. I lay still and did not move. In the morning, she was gone before I woke. Coffee made, my cup on the counter, still warm. She had stood in this same kitchen 20 minutes before me, done this one careful thing, and left before she had to see my face. I stood holding the cup and understood that this was not coldness. This was the behavior of a woman who was ashamed, not of what she had said, but of how much of herself had escaped in the saying of it. I walked into the bedroom. The bedside drawer was open. Travel journal, lip balm, charging cable, and beneath all of it the corner of a white envelope, my name on the front, her handwriting, blue ink, Marcus, no last name, no return address, just my name written the way you write something you have been holding for a very long time. I picked it up, turned it over, still sealed. I stood in that empty bedroom for 3 full minutes, which is a very long time to stand completely still, and then I put it in my coat pocket and drove to Nia's apartment. She opened the door and read my face and started with, "Marcus, I really cannot." Then she saw the envelope. She stopped, stepped aside and let me in. I sat on her couch. I held the envelope flat across both palms and I looked at her and I said it plainly. "Tell me what you know, not to use against her, because I love her and something inside her is broken that I did not break and I need to understand it before I make it worse." Nia sat down. She looked at the envelope for a long time. Then she told me about a man named Deshaun Reeves. She told me about a Buckhead apartment that Zara had called home for 2 years, about cameras installed in the bedroom that Deshaun had called safety measures, about a Fulton County judge who used the word paranoid about my wife in open court, about a restraining order violated twice while the system watched and documented and did not intervene in time, about a 25-year-old woman who walked out of a courthouse on a Tuesday in October with a duffel bag and nothing else, and spent the next 3 years rebuilding herself from the inside out. Then Nia told me about a different Tuesday, November, a bathroom floor in a downtown Atlanta office building. A phone call Zara made from that floor to Nia's number because there was no one else she felt she could call. Because in the weeks before that Tuesday, I had been distant, working late, half present, and Zara had convinced herself, in the quiet, painful logic of a woman who had already learned that love comes with conditions, that I did not want to know. That telling me would only confirm what she already feared. She had protected herself from a rejection I had never had any intention of delivering. My face became wet at some point during that conversation, and I did not remember it happening. I looked down at the envelope, put it back in my pocket, stood up. "Thank you," I said, and I walked out. "I want to be honest with you here, because I promised you the truth and not the comfortable version of it." What I felt walking to my car outside Nia's apartment in Atlanta was not only grief, it was something harder than grief, something with an edge to it that I had to look directly at before I could understand it. Zara had made a decision about me, about what I was capable of, about whether I deserved to know what was happening inside our marriage, and she had made that decision alone, in silence, and carried the consequences of it for 8 months while sleeping beside me every single night. She had written my verdict without holding the trial, and even understanding everything Nia had told me, even carrying the full weight of Deshaun Reeves and the Fulton County courthouse and the bathroom floor, that was not something I was simply going to absorb and release. Not immediately, not quietly. I love my wife, but I was not going to be the man who forgave everything in silence and disappeared. The following Thursday, at 9 in the evening, I parked outside the Southwest Atlanta Community Outreach Center. No flowers, no prepared speech, no performance of any kind. I sat on the front steps in my regular clothes, and I waited. When the door opened 20 minutes later, Zara stepped out mid-conversation, looked up, and saw me standing 15 feet away in the parking lot light. She stopped mid-sentence. The woman beside her said something quietly. Zara shook her head slightly. The woman moved on, and then it was just the two of us standing in a cold Atlanta night, our breath visible between us like small, quiet flags of surrender. "I know about Deshaun," I said. Her breath caught, sharp and audible, like a step missing on a staircase in the dark. "I know about the Tuesday in November," I continued. Her hand moved to her collarbone, involuntary, unguarded. the most honest gesture I had seen from her in months. I did not open the letter, I said. I want you to read it to me, only when you are ready. I will wait as long as that takes. She stood in the cold Atlanta night and looked at me. This man who had checked her location history, driven past her building, called her best friend, booked a dinner reservation like a quiet, carefully arranged test. And also this man who had made her tea with honey at the kitchen table, who had driven to Peachtree Grill alone rather than simply cancel, who was standing on cold concrete steps right now with empty hands, asking to be let in instead of demanding entry. Her hand moved just slightly toward me. She did not take my hand, not yet, but we both felt the movement and neither of us pretended we had not. We drove home in separate cars. She needed those 10 minutes. I understood that without being told. When I walked through the front door, she was already at the kitchen table. Coat still on, the envelope in front of her unsealed now. She had opened it in the car. She had read it alone first in the dark of the parking lot before she could stand to read it out loud, and I understood that without needing it explained. I sat across from her. Same table, same 2 chairs, same kitchen light on over the same Atlanta street, but an entirely different night than every night that had come before it. She read it aloud, starting from the beginning. Marcus, I need to tell you something I should have said the night it happened. She moved through every word she had written at 3 in the morning in the private dark of a sleepless night 6 months ago. Her voice held through the part about Deshawn, held through the Buckhead apartment and the courthouse, cracked once, just once, at the bathroom floor in November, at the 11 weeks, at the phone call to Nia because I was the person she loved and I was also, without knowing it, the person she was most afraid to tell. I sat with both hands flat on the table. I did not touch her. I did not speak. I was simply there, which was, I understood, the only thing being asked of me in that moment. She reached the final line. I do not think you would leave me if you knew. I think that is actually what terrifies me most. Her voice stopped. I said quietly, without ceremony, I am not leaving. A fact, not a vow. The same tone you would use to say the door is locked or the rain is coming. Immovable, simple, not dressed up in anything. I stood, walked around the table, sat beside her close enough that our arms touched, and stayed there. Zara looked at the letter in her hands, folded it, placed it on the table between us. Not in the drawer, not back in the envelope, on the table in the open where it had always belonged. She cried, not with screaming, not with performance, not with the defended strength she had spent years building, just present. Finally, painfully present, in a kitchen in Atlanta, at a table where 2 people had been sitting beside each other for 4 years without fully seeing each other. But here is where I have to be honest with you once more, because most stories end here and this one does not. One evening, not with anger, not with drama, but with the steady voice of a man who had decided that love requires honesty more than it requires comfort, I told her plainly. I forgive you, but I need you to understand what you took from me when you decided alone that I was not ready. That decision was not yours to make by yourself. The grief of that Tuesday in November belonged to both of us. You kept my half. She did not argue. She looked at me for a long time. I know, she said. 2 words, she meant them completely. And the knowing, the full, undefended acknowledgement of it was not the ending of something painful. It was the actual beginning of something real. 3 days later, Zara picked the letter up from the kitchen table, walked to the fireplace and stood there holding it. She looked back at me, a question without words. I gave a small nod. She held it to the flame. We watched it burn together without speaking. And then she sat back down across from me. Same table, same chairs, different people than the ones who had first sat here. She reached across the table. I took her hand. The kitchen light was on. The tea was getting cold. And for the first time in our marriage, there was nothing in that room that either of us was keeping from the other. That was the real beginning. Not the screaming in the kitchen, not the letter, not the steps outside the community center in the cold Atlanta night. This quiet kitchen, this reached hand, this woman who had been through fire twice and still chose to stay at the table. I am Marcus Carter, and that is the whole truth of it. If you enjoyed this story, like this video, and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching.